Or?
Yes, you're ready.
So I'm just laughing, thinking about the fact that we're taking December off, and I think, so that's going to give you, a good Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday to have these conversations with family members, because there's no time like the present. Who here has experienced the death of a grandparent, a spouse, a partner, a friend? Pretty much everybody. So why is it so hard to have these conversations? Death happens to be the biggest life transition that you're going to have, and we do a good job talking about everything else, but we have a really hard time talking about end of life. So how many people had difficult times talking about the birds and bees to their teenagers? I don't know about you. I thought it was hard. And talking about death and dying and end of life is, I think, in sort of that same uncomfortable category. So the first thing I want you all to do is we're going to say death out loud, because language is also an inhibitor, I think. People talk about somebody passing away, or I lost Uncle Ernie. Well, you didn't lose Uncle Ernie. He died. So we need to be really clear about this. So we're all going to take a moment, and on the count of 3, everybody's going to yell death so we can get the elephant out of the room. Okay, you ready? 1, 2, 3. Death! Feel better? Or do you feel like that? I love this picture, because when people ask me, so what are you up to these days? And I'm like, well, I try to encourage people to do end-of-life planning and have conversations. And most of them go, oh my God, I don't want to talk about that. And they put their head in the sand. I don't think that denial changes the outcome. It would be great, because we're pretty good at denial in a lot of things, but that doesn't change the outcome. I hate to be the bearer of bad tidings, but 100% of us are going to die. No, say it isn't so. If you're alive, you're going to die. This is what happens. So we need to get over the fear and the language and have meaningful conversations while we can. I love this. Because what this says is that you don't know when this is going to happen, and you may be in the middle of House of Cards or Gang of Thrones, and dang it all, you died and you didn't get to see the end of it. So this is also talking about age. Age is not, to me, part of this conversation. We know people that are children that die, and we know events happen and people are wiped out, and it's all ages. Now, obviously, when you're older, as my father likes to say, your runway is shorter. So, the probability is higher, yet I think we need to recognize that anything can happen. And when you think like that, I also think that you tend to find more joy in the moment and in daily life, that because you don't know when that time's going to happen. Another great cartoon. Death sometimes surprises you. It doesn't necessarily. You don't necessarily have time. You don't have a terminal illness or something. You just, as my husband used to say, if I get hit by the beer truck, here's where the life insurance policy is. So things happen, and I think that we need to kind of be aware of that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I come from 3 generations of financial advisors. I happen to be married to Tom, who's a fiduciary at thesedoricgroup.com. And so I grew up in a household, and continue to, that talk about planning and the what ifs. What if this, what if that, what are we going to do? So I tend to think that DNA, that planning is sort of in my DNA. I became an estates and trust paralegal after college, and for almost 10 years I worked with families especially after the death of a spouse. And I went to their homes looking for information. I deemed it sort of a scavenger hunt, going through desk drawers and attics and basements and trying to find all the data, because often I found a household that was grieving, fighting, decisions weren't made, they didn't know what to do, where to go, where things were. Where's the deed to the cemetery plot? You know, I didn't even know we had one, that kind of thing. So that was sort of my upbringing in terms of my training in estates and trusts. So what happened once was my great Aunt Letitia, who I love dearly, died suddenly. She didn't show up for her bridge game. And we came home from her service, and I said to my husband, where are we going to be? What's our plan when something happens to us? So I set out cemetery shopping, like, let's do this. And believe it or not, cemetery plots there's not that much space anymore. So people have, if you're interested, you ought to get in and check it out. We bought a stone. We bought a plot. We put Carpe Diem as my family's sort of mantra, which I love. Seize the day. Let's get things done today. And sadly, yet luckily, my in-laws are buried there. They moved here from the Midwest to be closer to us, and both of them have since passed away. And they're in our plot. So that's a good thing. We were ready. We were prepared. But then, this is my parents, also known as Nani and Boo. On a sunny day, beautiful sunny day in September, driving along, and I get a phone call. And my brother says to me 2 words, "Mom's dead." I talked to Mom the night before. "What do you mean she's dead? She wasn't sick." Like, the adrenaline flow is pretty amazing. Pulled over the side of the road, and I told him, I said, "You're joking. I talked to her last night." "No, she's dead." And with those 2 words, I would say that my world sort of convulsed, turned upside down, and instead of observing other families, which I did as a paralegal in this sort of chaotic emotional state, I found myself in that. Luckily, my only brother, and my father and I, we get along really well. We could talk through things, but the mountains of tasks that happen after somebody dies, it is literally mind-blowing. Who to contact, get a hold of the lawyer, what is the funeral home, make sure you call all Mom's best friends in a certain order, because if one of them finds out, and then there's a snowballing effect, like, you didn't call me. There's all kinds of things that happen in a very short period of time. And it's really, it's daunting, the amounts of tasks that happen. And what happened was my mom, I think, died without a plan. We hadn't had conversations. She left us with no instructions and no directions about what she would have wanted. So we had to sort of figure that out on our own, and what would she have liked, and you know, that was difficult. It took time. What happened to her possessions? All of the things that you have. People are going to want to know what happens to them, but also, you know, it can create problems if there's family discourse. It always seems too early until it's too late. This message is about having conversations now, because you don't know when the conversation stops. You no longer get the answers that you're going to need and you're going to want from the person who knows all of that. So everybody says, "Oh, you know, I'm only in my 40s and I shouldn't talk about this." Well, yeah, you should. You should have these conversations. And when somebody wants to talk to you and make a plan, like if a parent says to you, "You know, I want to talk to you about my funeral wishes," don't say, "Oh no, Mom, I don't want you to do that, because then you're going to die." Well, yeah, you are, but let's have this conversation, and let's talk about what's meaningful for you. My dad So after my mom died, my dad had a new nickname for me. He called me Stalker. I called my mom all the time, every day, and so he became like the new recipient of the phone calls. But really, I said to him after my mother's the experience of my mother's death that I didn't want to repeat it when he died. So I stalked him. I wanted to know what he had, where it was located, what his wishes were, and what his intentions were. And I hounded him, and we had conversations, and we still have conversations. He's alive in 86, and we're still having these conversations, but I wanted to know everything because I didn't want to have that same experience. And the conversations were they're meaningful. And they got funnier, believe it or not, as we went along. For example, he said, I want to be buried in 3 places. Okay, so Canada with his parents, with my mom, but he's also since remarried, so he wanted to be also with his my stepmom. And I'm like, so how does that work? Like, do we have 3 urns, 3 places? Does the top third of your body go in one place? And we would have these conversations, and then he'd say, oh my God, I can't, that's too complicated. So now we're down to 2, which is good. 2 is easier. But I said, I'll do it. I just need to be very clear about what it is that you want, because I don't want anybody questioning me. That's the thing. The other thing that I asked him to do was to write his own obituary, which he has done. And my brother, who had the thankless task of writing my mother's obituary, which is very difficult when you're emotionally distraught, because it's like taking an AP history exam, but you don't have all the facts and you don't know how to put it all together, but you have to do it in a truncated period of time. So I asked him to write one, and he's done it, and pretty much all we have to plug it in is the date and maybe if he wants to know what happened. But everything else is in place, and to me, that's a huge gift. The other thing that I would comment on, and my dad does not have any form of dementia, but Alzheimer's is a huge problem. We have over 5 million people that now have Alzheimer's in the US. They say every 65 seconds a person is diagnosed with Alzheimer's, which means memories are going to fade. So if you know somebody who has been diagnosed or has signs of dementia, you need to get the information before they can't give it to you. And you want them to talk about their wishes. So that's important. So what happened after my conversations with Dad is I interviewed hundreds of people, and I said, so what do you wish you had known before your loved one had died that would have saved you time, money, stress, or family arguments? And I enlisted my friend Mary Jo Brown & Company Design, to help me create a business and this what I call an organizer, which is like a workbook, to have everything in one place. But I wanted it to be practical and pragmatic, not morbid and morose. This is something that's like, where's all your stuff? What do you want to happen? And let's get it all together. So 4 years in the making. Thank you, Mary Jo, for your great name of Lasting Matters, which I love. So I'm going to give you some tips. Obituaries, again, they're a lot like history papers. Where'd you go to school? What was your education? What's your family? Do you have predeceased family members? Where did you volunteer? What's important? I urge you all to write a draft. I've written mine. I tweak it. I look at it like every 3 months. I'll kind of look at it and go, well, that's changed or this and that. But I keep a running dialogue because I know the value of having that for my family when the time happens. It's not if, it's when. So that's one hot tip. Write your own obituary. Funerals. And also obituaries, think about it as sort of a creative writing piece. Like this is I know you've all maybe, part of my job was to read the obituary page in the Globe to see if clients had died. So I read a lot of them, and some of them are sort of the straightforward and, here are all the facts, and some of them are actually really funny and show the personality of the person that's died. And I prefer those because it's sort of much more meaningful. Funerals. Funerals are a lot like weddings. Biggest fact, well, there are two big factors. One is sad and one's not. But weddings, well, it all depends. So far, so good. Weddings, you have like a year to plan, right? You have all the same factors are pretty much involved as funerals, but funerals you have 3 days to plan if you're actually going to have somebody's body there. Memorial service you have a little more time, but with funerals, you have to make these decisions. What flowers to have, where's it going to be, who's going to be invited, what food, what drink, all of these are the same things that you plan for weddings. It's just a different thing. So if you take the time to write down what you want to have for your funeral or your memorial service, it's really helpful to your family. I had a friend who was a nurse who sadly had pancreatic cancer. She planned her whole funeral, and it was joyful. It was, and you walked out and you said, that was my friend in spades, because she took the time and the care to create something very meaningful and individual. And there's nothing better than sort of, you came out with a smile instead of, thinking, did the minister really know the guy that died? We've all been to those kinds of funerals too. So I urge you to think about all of those things and what's important. I want a cocktail party. So let's have a party instead of a funeral. So possessions. This speaks loudly to when you add siblings, and if you're not an only child, siblings and blended families. So you've got a lot of people involved in dad's stuff. And so then what happens? Here are the things that family members fight about. They fight about who gets the summer home, what happens to dad's cool car, how about the furniture in the house, what happens to mom's wedding rings, artwork. And I've heard, with all the interviews I've had, I have heard horror stories. Stepsons coming in and literally after the memorial service taking artwork off the wall and heading out the door. Kids fighting over mom's jewelry and then never speaking again. The siblings are fighting. And then the whole blended thing is, I just heard a story about two widows who, one married once, divorced, married, and then remarried, and they live on opposite sides of the ocean, and they each want somebody buried, and the possessions, and it's like in court, and it's a mess. It's a mess. And apparently the guy died like 2 years ago, so, I don't know what happens there, but you can change this because you can write down what you want to actually have happen to your things, and make it clear, because if it's clear and it's in writing, that's why you have pencils today, sharpened, you can write down where your things are going to go, and then your family looks at it and says, that's what mom wanted. So we're not going to argue about this anymore. This is what she wanted. It makes it a lot easier. Private stuff, one of my favorite topics. Okay, who's got diaries? Not me anymore. I threw mine out because I know somebody whose diaries were found and read after they died, and it created such turmoil in the family. Mom talking about the favorite child, and then there are people that have told me about, people that had, believe it or not, affairs and other families They didn't find out. They're going through like Dad's desk, and they find this thing, and it's like, oh my God, Dad had another family. It's not good. So if you have secrets that you don't want anybody to know, you better get rid of them. I often think about Oprah Winfrey, who has like apparently stacks and stacks and stacks of diaries. I think, wow, wonder what's in those. But if I were her, I'd hit the shredder fast. So be wary. I actually have friends that have left after I've spoken to them. They've gone home and shredded their diaries. It's pretty funny. Passwords, keys, and combinations. Another hot tip. How many people know their dad's computer access? No. I only know it because I demanded that I have it. Passwords into things. We can barely keep track of our own passwords, but if your spouse dies and you don't know how to get into his computer, it can take years to unravel that whole digital world. A lot of people have these storage units. If you don't know somebody has a storage unit in Idaho or something, it becomes crazy, and sometimes there's good stuff inside of those. So you need to know what's in there. If you have guns, if you're a gun owner and you have safes, are your guns loaded? One of the questions I have asked is make sure your family knows if they're loaded, because then you get the police to come in and take the firearms out of the house. But these are all you don't want your family going through and finding a loaded gun and having something tragic happen. Safe deposit boxes, everybody may or may not have one now, but where's the key? Where's the combination? Where did you hide it? When my grandparents died, my dad was an only child, and we went through, they had drawers full of keys. And we'd go up there on the weekends and just try to fit keys to locked cabinets and things like that. And I know the story of a couple that built a house, and they put 3 safes in the walls. The wife sadly had a heart attack and died. She was the only one that knew the combinations. So they had to get the locksmith, and I mean, it was just sort of a disaster. So all of these things are really important. Will anybody know what to do without you? So only you. We're all individuals. We have stuff in our heads, in our minds, that nobody else knows. It's really important to somehow put that in writing somewhere, that somebody will be able to figure out what it is that makes up your life after you die, because they have to wrap it all up. It's like, I don't know, it can take years sometimes to do that. It's really important that somebody knows what you have and what your wishes are. So all these decisions really matter. I'm going to go through some. Who gets Dad's cool car if they're 4 siblings? So if you have something really cool, think about that. Who's going to get it, that item? What happens to your body after you die? Do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want your ashes, like my dad, in 3 different places? Or do you want it scattered in the ocean where you live? I mean, what are the things that you want to see happen to your actual physical being? What happens to your collections, your treasures, the things that matter to you? And maybe you have a really cool guitar that's really valuable, yet your spouse doesn't know that, and so she ends up, tossing in the dumpster when you die. You don't want that to happen. You want that special guitar to go to somebody. Who's going to announce your death on Facebook? Do you want that to happen? And how do you regulate that? I don't know about you. I know people that died years ago that are still on Facebook. And they're still on LinkedIn because nobody knows their passwords to undo it. So, think about that too, because social media plays a role in all of this. These are my buddies. Who's going to tell your stories, and what stories should they tell at your service if you're going to have a service? Picking those people now, and maybe even writing down some of the things that are important to you, or having a conversation with them. Look, when I die, I want you to speak in my service. Oh, I don't want to talk about that. No, but I do, so let's talk about it. So making those decisions now is also really helpful. What happens to the pets? Do you have dogs? My daughter, Annie, who's here, took that great picture. What happens to your pets when you die? You know, pet lovers, we get it, right? What are we going to do? Make a plan. Make a plan for them. So all these things, I call these the 3 Ds: decisions, details, and documents. We do a good job with documents, wills, trusts, all the sort of that. Not so much with advance directives, very important to do though. But I'm all about making decisions, articulating them, and all of the details that make up you as an individual matter. They will matter, and they matter a lot when you're dead. A lot more, probably. So don't leave your mess behind. This is probably very reminiscent of a lot of, like, you know, when your parents live in a house for 50 years and it'll maybe take you a couple of years just to empty the thing. Do your family a favor, clean out the stuff. Go through it now, get rid of it. So I'm all about purging and cleaning up. Get organized. Don't leave a mess behind. Again, what's in your head is gone when you're dead. Only you know what your wishes are. You know what your information is. Once you're not here, once you're under the ground, or who was saying that recently, you're not going to be able to give them any information. So, the end of my talk. This is Thanksgiving next week. Highly recommend having a great conversation with Dad if you're washing dishes next to him. So, what do you think about, you want to be buried or cremated? Believe me, it starts a great conversation. So, you never know. And those people that don't want to talk about it, that's fine. Just make sure that you've collected your information. But I recommend have this difficult conversation. And the more you have it, it's like practice makes perfect. The more you have it, the easier it gets. And then you also think about what you want. Don't think you're immune to dying. 100%. Sorry. So thank you for coming. And hopefully I didn't run too